Hey everyone, I've always wanted an OLED monitor, but they've been so expensive I've never really bought them. But after seeing the prices drop quite a lot in recent years, I finally bit the bullet and invested in an MSI OLED, and it looks absolutely incredible, especially for like dark and moody games like Resident Evil Requiem. And that's kind of a given because, this OLED monitor has true blacks due to the individual subpixel control and stuff, but what's not really a given is that after using this monitor for both gaming and work for quite a few months, there's a few annoyances and niggles that I came across that I wanted to talk about in this video. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is burn-in, and again, that's something that we all know about, but I wanted to quickly talk about that from my own perspective, then I can talk about the more nitty-gritty and fun things that I've actually explored with these two monitors. But when it comes to burn-in, basically OLEDs actually have individual pixels, individual group of pixels with organic matter in them, and what can actually happen is that over time those individual subpixels can actually break down. And this can especially happen if you've got something on the screen that's there a lot, such as the Windows taskbar or a particular, HUD in a game or something like that. If it's basically constantly on the screen, then what you can get is burn-in, where basically even if you're on a different game or a different scene or using some software or something, you're always going to see that thing that's burnt in. And Optimum Tech recently done a really good video after 2 years of having an OLED himself, and even though he'd only played Overwatch for 400 hours, the actual HUD from that had actually been burnt into the screen, and that can be a bit of a worry. And what's annoying is that everyone's experiences vary. Like, some people experience burn-in after just 6 months, other people seem to just abuse their OLED and have the taskbar on for like 2 or 3 years straight and have no burn-in whatsoever, so it can be a bit hit or miss. But two of the key things you should do is hide the Windows taskbar, because basically if that's constantly there, that could actually burn in, so by default you're meant to hide that. And secondly, you're meant to enable screensavers. And the fun thing with that is I actually went and found the original Windows 3D Maze screensaver, and I've actually got that set up on here, and it looks absolutely brilliant. And yeah, it's just really good for nostalgia purposes, and it kind of makes the whole purchase worth it in many ways. Okay, not quite, but you know what I mean. The other thing is that I've seen people on Reddit talk about how, direct sunlight's come into their room and then ended up damaging their OLED, and as a result I'm really paranoid about that, because this screen's here and right opposite it is a window, and actually in the afternoon we get direct sunlight straight through there, which would be hitting on here. And even if I actually close the blinds that we've got, it still does let some sunlight through and actually go onto this monitor. And in theory that should hopefully be fine, but it's still something that concerns me. Like, there's always something in the back of my mind thinking, somebody said something on Reddit, so that must be true. But burn-in is something that, we know about, and to be fair, the monitor does actually have a lot of protection built into it. It's got things like pixel shift and panel protect and, static screen detections and taskbar detection, and it's got so much built into it that actually I do feel reassured that the chance of burn-in will be reduced compared to like really older OLEDs that don't really have that protection. But what I didn't expect as much with the OLED was actually VRR Flicker related issues, because sometimes if I'm on like ChatGPT to run my entire life, because that's how it's meant to be used, then I've got in black mode by default because that's what my system is set to, then I was actually getting loads of like black flicker and things, which actually made it really hard to use that particular web page because the background is entirely black, and that seems to trigger something, in the VRR, and I get lots of flicker. And that is something that can potentially be fixed, and it is also something that can actually happen to LCDs as well. But in general, OLEDs can be more susceptible to VRR flicker issues and things like that. And I've owned like 5 or 6 LCD screens in my time, and none of them have had VRR flicker or anything like that, and then my OLED did immediately. The next thing I didn't expect as a bit of an OLED noob was just how sort of premium the OLED panel would feel, but how there's some consequences of that as well. And that's because, whilst these both technically have glass in them at some point, this is more of a, this LCD is more of a plasticky type feel, whereas this is actually a glass type feel. Like, it's a really thin panel for the OLED technology and stuff, and the subpixel control, the pixel by pixel control. But the consequence of that is you actually get more visible finger marks and more glare and things like that on an OLED. And obviously this can vary per monitor, but just in general, you are going to see more finger marks and glare and stuff with the OLED because of this glass related feel. And like, even now where I put my hand over the monitors, I've actually got finger marks here that weren't there before, but yet they're not there as much on the, LCD screen. And, I've got 2 young children, they like playing Wobbly Life and games like that, which is kind of a goated game, by the way. If you ever get a chance to play it, it's really fun. But, when my kids come to play the game, they'll actually be touching the monitor with their hands and pointing at stuff on the screen, and I end up getting absolutely loads of finger marks everywhere. But, when I was unboxing this monitor, there was actually a microfiber cloth included in the box, and I was like, oh, that's nice of them. But actually I didn't realise as an OLED noob again that, they include that microfiber cloth because you're going to get finger marks all the time, and you're constantly going to be cleaning this like some sort of OCD mad person cleaner. But yeah, that's sort of some of my rants out the way, and I'm going to talk about some more negative points, but first I want to be positive for once and actually talk about how amazing the OLED looks. And you don't always see the difference, especially on a lighter scene like this. I mean, yeah, maybe the colours are more vibrant and stuff on the OLED, but just in general, things look so much sharper on an OLED compared to an LCD screen. Like, it is surprising how much of a difference there is. And a big part of the OLED superiority, if you want to call it that, is that OLEDs actually have individual subpixel control. So actually, I bought this really cheap microscope on Amazon, and actually when I was holding it up to the screens, you can see the individual subpixels and things like that. So basically, for every single pixel, a pixel can turn on or turn off and mix up the colors and things like that, which you don't get as much with the LCD, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, with the OLED, what that means is if you've got something that should be black, for example, then the pixels there can simply turn off, and then, you just get complete blackness. You get something called true blacks. But with an LCD screen, you don't really get that, because an LCD screen is more of like a sandwich. You've basically got like a backlight, and then you've got a subpixel sort of array, but basically the pixels can't turn on and off individually. What you've got instead is like a filter. So again, with this microscope, what you can actually see is something that looks like subpixels, but actually they're not really subpixels. What you're actually seeing with this output is actually the filters, the color filters and the pixel filters on here, which allow you to see certain light based on what should be on the screen. So as a result, where you've got blacks, it's not actually black, it's like a grey sort of color, compared to here where you do have proper blacks. And you might be thinking, why does that matter? But the reason that matters is that, let's say you're playing a game like, Space Marine 2 or Resident Evil Requiem, a dark and moody game, and you've got a particular area where there's no light sources whatsoever. In that particular situation, you should be seeing black, right? Because there's no light, and intrinsically you need to be seeing black. But with an LCD display, what you actually get instead is like a grey sort of colour, because an LCD panel can't completely give you those true blacks. But as a result, that then ruins immersion, right? Because, your brain kind of knows, oh, that particular bit of the screen doesn't have light sources, it should be black, but this is showing me, some sort of grey colour, and it just doesn't feel as realistic compared to that OLED that has pixel by pixel control. That's a cute cat. But by having the pixel by pixel control and being able to just turn off the pixels, for the black or whatever, it leads to a lot more realism. And, I don't usually watch TV much on my actual computer, but as a test, I was rewatching The West Wing and I put it on here, and actually there's a particular scene where Jed Bartlett is ripping into somebody who exposed some secret, and it's a really dark and moody scene inside the Oval Office, and, with the OLED, that scene just feels so much more perfect and true to life, because it's nighttime, there's not many lights on, and, it's kind of a dark, depressing scene, and in that particular scene the OLED shines. Obviously not literally, it's not literally shining, it's the opposite of that. It shines because you've got those true blacks and you've got that nitty-gritty feeling, whereas with the LCD screen, for the exact same scene, everything has more sort of greys and dark greys and things, because you don't get those true blacks, and as a result it does kill immersion a little bit compared to the OLED. So yeah, I can see why people say, once you go OLED you can't go back, because it is really, really impressive to actually play a game or watch TV or a movie or whatever with an OLED compared to an LCD. In some ways it's one of those things you can only appreciate in person, and also by watching this video. Now you've clicked it, you've got to watch the entire thing without clicking off, sorry about that. But basically, if you ever get a chance to go in person into a particular shop, it is worth doing that, so you can see like an OLED and an LCD screen next to each other, because there is such a difference between the quality of them. But then for work, it's actually not as good, and actually probably I spend 85-90% of my time actually working on here, and you could argue that actually an OLED isn't really designed for that, and I'll talk about that more later on in the video. But one of the things that some people notice with an OLED for work is that actually the text isn't as clear, and this can be generally a problem with OLEDs, ironically, due to the fact that it's got this, pixel by pixel control. It means that sometimes the text isn't as sharp as on an LCD screen, and this is something that's apparently worse with like 1440p OLEDs. This is actually a 4K one, and I haven't really noticed any major issues with the text, but yeah, with 1440p ones it is apparently particularly bad. But there are some things you can do within Windows, if that's your operating system, such as disabling clear type text, I think, which can then improve the situation a little bit. And I'll talk more about the practicalities of using an OLED for work in a minute, but next I wanted to talk about gaming again, because when I first went into a game on an OLED, I literally couldn't see anything. Like, the menu wasn't too bad. I went into the game and it was actually really hard to play it because none of the detail was there. And that's because OLEDs are intrinsically less bright. Like, I've, changed the actual settings on here just as similar as possible, just for, a background demo. But in general, an OLED isn't going to be anywhere near as bright as an LCD, due to the fact that you've got, individual pixel control, and the fact that actually if you whack up the brightness of an OLED to 100% all the time, then that can actually cause more burn-in issues and actually shorten the lifespan. So in general, an OLED's not going to be as bright, and that means when you go into a game, you often need to recalibrate it. And luckily this isn't that hard, you just go into the settings and, there's always that slider test where you can actually recalibrate the game. And that's not really a flaw of OLEDs, because you're always going to need to recalibrate things with a new monitor, but it's just interesting to see, the difference in the display technology technologies when I've got like one LCD and one OLED, you know, and actually seeing in real time just how sort of dark this is compared to the LCD that has that backlight technology and things like that. The next thing I didn't expect as much is the OLED sort of care protection that's built into here. And, you know, whether I'm working on here or gaming, it's never really convenient to, you know, just have the monitor turn off for this OLED care thing to actually run. And it seems to take 5 to 10 minutes. Like I read online, it should only be a few minutes, but it's constantly like 5 to 10 minutes that my monitor is then completely out of operation, which can be a little bit of a hassle, especially when, you know, you've got a deadline with work or you're playing a game and you don't really want to just take that long of a break. Overall, though, I really do like having bought an OLED. Like, it wasn't cheap, you know, it was probably twice the price of the LCD screen, but there was a time where it might have been 5 times the price or 6 times the price, and actually, yeah, I'm really happy to have the OLED. I mean, I mainly work on this as opposed to game on it, but when I am gaming, it is nice to have the OLED there and actually see it in all of its glory and see the true blacks and see the extra clarity and, you know, response times and things you get from that. And you could probably argue that for work, you probably shouldn't buy an OLED monitor. It's probably better to have an, you know, an LCD or mini LED monitor or something like that. But for me personally, I quite like now having an OLED and an LCD, especially if, you know, I've finished rendering a video and I want to see what the colors look like on both monitors. I think that's quite a good thing because obviously some of you guys will have an OLED, some of you will have an LCD. So from a personal perspective, I quite like having both. But I think that if I was just like a full-time video editor doing work for someone else, I'd probably want to stick to an LCD or something else. That wraps up my views though, but I'd be eager to hear from you down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please click the thumbs up button and please subscribe to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.